Hello everybody and welcome back to Let's Remember Suikoden 3. We are playing as Hugo. We have been turned down to have an audience with the Zexing Council, and now we have decided to snoop on Melville and his friends, the self-appointed Saint Loa Knights. This is an interesting sort of bit of side business, a bit of filler. As I alluded to in the previous section, that's a new word I just made up. That makes it the most previous. The previous. No, I sort of call this busy work, and it sort of is. But I think that there is thematic importance and even some other importance to glean by looking at our interactions with these characters. And there's a couple of things going on. The quick one I'll get out of the way is that Melville's going to be dealing with some difficulty about his father, and sort of doubts he has about his father that Guillaume has put into his mind. And the truth is just that ties into Hugo very, very slightly, in the sense that Hugo doesn't have a father that we are aware of. We don't know who his father is. He seems to be absent. There are theories within the Suikoden community as to who Hugo's father is. Place your bets. I don't know. But I think the more important reason why we're interacting with these characters is twofold. One, it's to show that politics tends to melt away in the face of, like, interactions with children. So, like, Melville and Alanis and Elliot, they don't really care that Hugo is a Grasslander, and Hugo has no particular problems with them because there's Exen. And often it happens a lot in literature and in movies and in all art, and even in real life. Children aren't really bogged down by the same biases and prejudices that we have as adults, because you're not born with you're not born prejudiced, right? You're not born that way. You have to learn it, right? And children are young and generally haven't learned it yet, so they don't really give a crap about the sort of politics involved between ethnic groups or gender or sexuality. They generally don't care. And so in showing that there are characters in this space that are able to interact freely, and even here, like, Alanis is really kind of, she thinks that Hugo's kind of cool because he has his own knife, right? Like, that's just to show that the grander politics of the game space fall short when we're dealing with children. And that's sort of a general commentary on the nature of politics and other things as well. Politics, everything is politics, first off. Every interaction you have with another human being is politics. But politics, as we come to understand the term, is fairly petty. And children, like, there's certainly politics at play with the interactions that children have with each other, but it's not the same thing that we have as adults. It just isn't. So that's sort of what's going on a little bit here. Another thing is that we are dealing with three children who idolize Chris and the other knights, and the way that they go about their idealization of Chris and the Knights of Zexen, and sort of war in general, is a little bit of a commentary, intentional or not, on the game's part about the nature of play and sort of what it means to have hero figures, and then what happens if those hero figures fall short, and sort of the entire theme at play in Hugos Chapter generally is innocence. It's idealism, right? Hugo leaves his village on a mission, and he's just going to go out and see the world and come back, and, well, isn't he going to grow up to be a fine young warrior? What was it like to see the Zexen? And he doesn't get to return home. When he returns home, it is burning, and his friend gets killed. So, we have these these three kids who are talking about, I'm the Silver Maiden, I'm the Knight of Rage, I'm Elliot, I smell things really well. The Swordsman of Wind, he calls himself. Which I don't know if that's an intentional joke, but it's kind of a joke, considering the smell thing. But you have these kids posing and talking about how they want to, we want to be just as cool as the knights and things like that. And then we have to deal with the fact that just last chapter, Boris killed plenty of people and Chris kills Lulu, and there's this strange thing happening where we get to see people who idolize Chris and the others, or people who just idolize soldiers, right? And then we get to see the reality of what happens on the battlefield, and the reality is terrible. Which, that seems like a self-evident thing to say, right? To sit back and say, well, the realities of war are terrible and children do not apprehend or understand those realities. And that's absolutely true. And that's absolutely true of anybody who's not been around war in any sense, or violence in any sense, right? Violence in general is this thing, like, it's not a controversial thing to say, but violence is pretty shitty. It's terrible. And the fact that we do it to each other is heartbreaking on a level that is hard for me to even express in words, right? But as kids, we don't understand the nature of violence, and even as adults, like, I've held a gun, I've fired a gun, but I've never been in combat. I will never be in combat. So I can never fully empathize or understand a soldier's experience, right? I can offer my sympathy and my support, but I will never understand an experience that I have not experienced myself, right? So when we look at Melville and the others sort of going off on this quest and pretending to be these idealized knights, we're looking at a form of hero worship and a form of play that is, it's cute and it's sort of nice in the way that it, like, their desire to go on a little fun adventure is something that we kind of get caught up in. Like, there's something cute and appealing about that. They're calling Hugo Duke Hugo of Cardia. I couldn't pronounce it for a minute. And there's something nice about that, but it's also, this is child's play, literally. And part of Hugos Chapter encompasses child's play. Certainly Melville has his own reasons for wanting to go out and find, like, this ghost ship that his father said that he found, and Guillaume is like, your father's a liar. Like, there's motivation that's going on there, but also you want to put these two together because they can use an attack. Lulu is always by himself. But there's this thing that happens in Hugo's chapter where you are engaging in child's play, going off on this children's side quest. Hugo is still in the realm of not being fully an adult and not being aware of the greater politics that are going on around him. And that's sort of reflected in his interactions with these three characters. And it keeps the mood of the chapter very light, right? The mood of the chapter is fairly light, until maybe things sort of shift a little bit at the end when you're leaving Zexen, when you're leaving Vinay del Zexe, and then you're heading on your way back to your village. But it's supposed to be, this very light thing that then has a very strong tonal shift. So while this is basically like, it feels like a filler episode of like an anime, right? Like, this is, if I was making an adaptation of this game, like the manga does, right? You don't have this segment. You don't have all this crap. You don't need all this crap. But to call it crap is also me sort of minimizing or reducing the effect it has on the narrative. The contrast exists here, as I've sort of said before, intentional or not, where we have sort of, this idea of imagination and play, and then the reality that comes in. Sergeant Joe says, I thought their imagination in games would appeal to one of your age, Lulu. And, Lulu wants to pretend he's an adult. Hugo wants to pretend he's, more mature and things like that. It's a very strange way of expressing these things, but it is an important way of expressing these things. And it's all the more interesting that it comes within the context of play and like make-believe and adventure, and the contrast between, well, this is real and this is not, and now we're dealing with that. I always forget that we have runes. The wind rune is basically defense. Water is magic and some attack. We'll use that for later. So we have them attack. They have a combo attack that we want to use, and Lulu sadly does not have much. The enemies in here are tough. I've seen guides before that have completely and unironically recommended like leveling Hugo to level 20. They hit hard. They hit very, very hard. Hugo right now is level 15, which is fine. That's enough to get us sort of through what we need to do. But I do find it interesting. Again, there's that word. I do find it of note that in the course of going about this sort of child's play, of going out and trying to help Melville and Alanis and Elliot, we have to expose ourselves to some pretty, actually real danger. So it's like, let's go on this adventure, except for the fact that this adventure is really dangerous and not really an adventure at all. It's we're in a cave full of monsters. And I could very easily get a real game over, whatever we consider that to represent, right? And see, even them, like right there, I used their combination attack, and all it did was 1 damage against the monster, right? There's that gap between the reality of things and then the make-believe that you want to participate in, right? It's very strange. But it's actually something that is being supported, again, I will continually say, intentional or not, through the gameplay that's happening right now, right? You can see I just killed these monsters. I leveled up twice, right? It's insane. And just serves to further the point that I'm in a dangerous space. So there's the notion of, okay, this is play, this is make-believe, if you cross your fingers and count from 1 to 10, you can get up off the ground again, right? It's from a musical called Blood Brothers. If you're interested, it's a very good musical. So what feels fairly extraneous isn't, and I've sort of really bent over backwards to explain why I think it's not, but I think it's at least a valid interpretation of what the game is doing. Face level, what it's really just doing is padding out Hugos Chapter, because if Hugos Chapter was just go back, get denied audience, and then have to go back, like it doesn't work. There has to be something. There has to be some glue holding it together, and I think the glue holding it together isn't so much narrative as it is thematic. And we can see it here, Melville's still going on. Night, Elliot, if your horse were to collapse, you would have to walk great distances. They're still putting on that facade. The same way that Lulu wants to be a warrior, so he puts on a facade. And Hugo sort of, he doesn't talk tough, but he definitely isn't what he wants to be, yet he acts like the thing he wants to be. Even though he is not that thing yet, Like, a good way to think of it would be, Lulu and Hugo, they basically they want to be like Jimba, right? Jimba, tough warrior and all that, but it's just, here they are running around with kids sleeping in a cave in the middle of the night. It's very, very odd. And Hugo sort of plays into their little thing, you know, even nights get tired. Like, Hugo's just old enough to understand that these kids want their make-believe. But it's just a matter of, you know what, this sort of stuff can't last. And the game shows us this because it wants to tell us that this can't last. You know. And there's personal stakes, and, like, you know, Hugo's asking, why do you want to find the ship? You know, Melville wants to do it for his father. What does she want? You know, Alana says, I have to leave soon. You know, she'll have to leave her friends, and she's very sad that this will be like their last little bit of adventure together. And these are all very real, real things, right? So, as always, our interactions aren't meaningless, right? There's human emotion here, right? Having to move around as a kid sucks. It's a real thing, and it's interesting to have that reflected in a child that you find in a fantasy RPG. But you know, the game's talking about certain things a little bit. Mostly, it just wants to provide some idyllic or light tonal elements before, you know, you head back to the Cardia Village. This is all the more effective if you are entering the Cardia Village as Hugo. I'm having trouble running up this thing. On Hugo, on a, like, this is your first character that you play as, which will tend to be the case. So you'll play through, and the game's doing the whole thing of, like, hey, this is silly RPG fun, and then all of a sudden, oh shit, people are dead. A point I keep reiterating, but a point that I think is important to reiterate, is that Hugos Chapter 1 is also taking some of the lighthearted JRPG tropes and using them to kind of pull a bait and switch. It's doing a sort of rope-a-dope thing where it sort of gets you with some saccharine idealism and then says, well, actually, it doesn't work like that. It's effective. Not as effective, I think, playing in this order, which is sort of a decision that I maybe shouldn't have made. I don't know. Shouldn't have made's a strong word. I think maybe starting off with Hugo would have been strong, but I think it would have given the wrong idea about the game on the first couple of episodes, right? Ghetto to Chris to Hugo gives us an understanding of this, first as a political thing, then as a sort of character struggle, and then as a not full-on deconstruction of JRPG behaviors or tropes, but certainly an adjustment to the tropes that we understand. The one we keep on coming back to, the destroyed hometown, finally being given, you know, political context. This group of, you know, precocious children doing their thing, being given real-world concerns. Melville wants to go on an adventure because of his father. Alanis wants to have a final good adventure with her friends before she has to leave. Like, there's all of these things that exist. And it just sort of is to catch you off guard, right? And Hugo plays into it still, you know, say, no, they made me a duke, we should do what they want, we should go in. But it's, you know, it's this fine line that the game is skirting. It's like, there are bandits down there with swords, like, that's crazy. And so we start to skirt the line between, I think I go in here, between adventure and then, like, oh, well, this is danger, right? I'm lost? No, this is correct. But there's terrible, terrible monsters still, which is the worst thing ever. So this segment is actually, like, it counts sort of as an introductory dungeon too. Perhaps not a really, you know, in-depth one. It's not the same as climbing up the mountains as Ghetto and dealing with some really tough characters or fight encounters, but it reaches a similar sort of edge. And really what we want to do is just attack, attack, attack. Lulu has sort of Cyclone. I never knew that was a rune. So it enhances abilities, so that's like a support thing. He's gonna eat from his lunchbox in the middle of combat. It's fresh too. It says so in the menu. When you're looking at it, it says it's fresh lunch. That's how you know it's good. This will sound really callous, especially considering Lulu's fate, but enemies love attacking Lulu. I don't know if it's programmed that way or not, but enemies really, really like attacking Lulu, which is sort of crazy, because he's not durable at all. And I'm not using any skills to turn him into, like, for him to draw aggro. He just sort of does it. But here we go. We'll make it through this dungeon, hopefully quick. You can just drop down some of these edges like this, though, which is really nice. Sort of go from there. I believe we will have a duel. Maybe we'll stop right before that duel. We will see. I'm at the bottom. I'm at the bottom. Here we go. So we're doing okay. I hope the point I was making about innocence and everything was going on was okay. And see, like, now it's like, holy shit, these kids are fighting bandits. Like, it sounds so funny for me to be like, look at this crazy stuff. But now I'm just like flat out, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like, this isn't like some Scooby-Doo thing where it's a monster in a suit. These are bandits with swords. These are cutthroats. Children's games have become something more. The game's not gonna sit down and really argue that point, but it's like, that's sort of what's happening. You know? And I guess it's trying to keep everybody this, sort of chipper, because it also wants to give you time with Lulu. And also, here's another example of it, right? So we just beat the enemies in battle. I'm attacking them with knives and swords and halberds and things. And, you know, Hugo says, "How are the bandits?" And Sergeant Joe says, "The ropes are secured. They'll be unconscious for some time." We're not killing the bad guys, right? That's not what's happening. We're going on a, you know, an adventure where we're knocking the bad guys out and tying them up, which makes everything that happens at the end all the more clashing with everything that's come before. It just has that effect. I'm really glad it has that effect, but without knowing that it's leading up to that, things can feel fairly strange. I'm going to save the game. And we will go from there. Hugo's story. I usually don't like showing the save process, but it's pretty important. Not to show off, but to just stress that it's a thing in there. It's like, if I didn't have that save, my last save, or my other save on my card, is for the start of the Trinity Shrine, before Hugo's story even starts, which means that if I died in battle or got a game over, I would have to start Hugos Chapter over, which would be absolutely abysmal. I'd be so mad if that had to happen, right? So it's this weird systems thing that I don't enjoy, and I sort of want to keep on stressing that it exists. because it has this thing where it's like, give up or keep trying, and keep trying just deposits you to where your last save was. In other games, like, obviously, the save point thing, this is nothing new. It's something that's in the structure of every game, right? It's, you save, and that's how it is. Also, Guillaume's here. Ho, 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 ho. We'll talk about Guillaume. The only thing I'm going to say is that if a game tells me to be like, no, I don't give up. I want to start from the start of the battle, and I don't want to have to start from another character's chapter. So here we go. Here we go. Guillaume being treacherous. Which will give us our first duel, and that's something that happens too in these games, is that there are duels, sometimes with lasting consequences. For instance, there's a duel in, well, there's a lot of duels where characters can die. There's one where character can die in the first Suikoden. There's actually a duel in Suikoden 5 against a villain where a bunch of people have various reasons to want to duel him, and you can have them all in your party, and then say one of those characters loses the duel. I'm pretty sure they get killed off, and then somebody else duels the enemy again. It's really strange. You can have a party full of like 4 people who all want to duel the same person, and then you just have to choose. The nice thing about the duels is that they don't always revolve around the POV characters. So, here, we're actually going to be dueling, and Melville is going to be the character that we are dueling as. The whole thing with Guillaume, he's like, this is where I store my riches. I don't want anyone finding it. Oh, your father this. Like, it's very Saturday morning cartoon villain. So it's just like, meh. We get to beat up Guillaume plenty of times. That is, until Melville's father spoke about it in his discovery. He's a jerk, basically. And I want to get to the duel, because the duel is, it's fairly simple stuff. Do we have to fight these fellows first? Right, so we do. But, nice thing, magic, so, you know, cool. And we'll heal at the start. I should have healed. I thought it was just the duel. So this one will run a little bit longer than the 30 minutes, but we'll get it done. Right, there's a lot more baddies. That's not cool. But haha, water rune, the best. Look at that frame rate. Look at that wonderful frame rate. This thing goes from freaking 60 frames down to like 20 right there. Probably worse than 20. So, medicine C for Hugo. Then Lulu will have attack, and there we go. Magic. It's always good. And Hugo dodged, which was even better. So we just press the attack here. Now I'm just talking about the game for a minute, because the point I really wanted to make during this episode has generally been made, and we can talk about the dueling system, right? System's a weird word. I don't want to talk about why systems is a weird word, but it's a weird word. I prefer structures, which is something that another critic peer used, and I just sort of held on to. It explains things a lot better than systems. But now we have our duel, and basically what it is, if it functions the same way that I think it does, my memory being hazy, you can either attack, defend, or use like a power attack, and you have to listen to what your opponent is saying and respond accordingly. So, haha, it is time for us to duel. Let me start with this. right? So I think death blow beats attack. Or not? Oh boy. I don't remember that happening. You can beat Guillaume with Melville, I'm pretty sure, but wow, the game was really generous there. Oh man. Let's just imagine that. I feel so bad about that. Like the narrative that portrays of like Melville just getting up there and Guillaume just basically like beat the crap out of him right there. That's terrible. But we get to beat Guillaume up later on. It's a nice moment about, you know, the kid gets to be hero in his own way, and they get to have their final sort of little victory, but it still is that setup between, like, here's a cartoonish villain running away, and then, like, let's go back home. Also, again, I say it, like, also your home is burning. Like, it's this very big contrast. And it's this thing where in better times, I guess, like this would be the height of adventure, right? But instead, just war is going to erupt. I feel like I'm repeating the same points. It's just like that is what this segment is. It's 100% what that segment is. Right? And it has its own miniature narrative, but I don't know how invested you get in the story of Melville and his father and all these things. Not compared to the larger things that are at play. But we have found the ship. Goonies never say die. So let us finish this cutscene, and then when we get back to Vinay dels Exe, we will stop and we will continue from there, and I think we'll be able to get to Cardia. I might be wrong. This might have a little bit more sections than Chris's segment did. Chris's segment moves fairly fast. Hugo's has all this in the middle, unfortunately. Thematically interesting, but sort of narratively clumsy. All right. Come on. Quack, quack, quack. Sergeant Joe. He's great. He's a duck and he beats people up with a halberd. He has and always shall be my friend. So we'll move here to Vinay dels Exe, and I will see you all in the next segment. That was our weird Saturday morning cartoon adventure. Thank you all for watching very much. I love you. I will see you around. Bye.